This is why it is welcome that the European Medicines Agency, in one of its first public inquiries on the 26th of September this year, called together patients, carers, doctors, pharmacists and academics to look into this matter further. And it will be interesting to see what outcomes come from this investigation upon its conclusion. I also think that we have a duty to set the mistakes or oversights of previous governments right, which is why we are here today to seek justice for the victims of sodium valproate in pregnancy and their families. This is why we on this side of the House welcome the calls for the government to look into how they can help compensate these families who have been so significantly affected. Before I continue, it must be noted that this drug, as others have already said, is an effective treatment, and for many it may be the only drug that works for them. Nevertheless, there is a systematic failure to inform women of the dangers of taking valproate. If expectant mothers had had the risks laid out clearly for them, then many children would not have been harmed, and I hazard a guess that we would not be debating this issue today. This is why Labour promised in our election manifesto earlier this year that we would look into this further by holding a public inquiry if we'd won the general election. So we now make this plea to the government. The evidence collected by InFact shows that despite the government, pharmaceutical companies and regulatory bodies knowing about the risks for 40 years, this knowledge was withheld from women, which meant they were unable to make informed decisions about their drug treatment during pregnancy. I must ask the Minister, why have we not got to the bottom of this injustice? And isn't it about time that we did? A lot of the issues we must understand and investigate are historic, yet for some they are still very prominent in their present. There are many families living with the repercussions of this lack of information given to them. Honourable members may have watched the Victoria Derbyshire show in recent months, where valproate has been discussed, including just last month when Deborah Mann, who took valproate during her pregnancy, discussed how the drug had affected her daughter Branwen. Deborah had been given a dose of valproate, 5,000 milligrams, which is 5 times higher than the recommended dose of 1,000 milligrams daily. And the fact that any dose above 1,000 milligrams is considered to have the largest level of risk. Branwen had to wear splints. The daughter, Branwen, had to wear splints every day since she was a little girl. She is in chronic pain every day, has migraines and has problems with both her brain and eyes. At just 22, Branwen has been told that she could go blind, have a stroke or even die at any moment. I recently met with the inspirational Janet Williams and Emma Murphy, who a number of honourable members on all sides of the House have paid tribute to, and I now realise that they're actually in the public gallery. They set up InFact in November 2012 after 2 of Janet's children and 5 of Emma's children were diagnosed with fetal anticonvulsant syndrome. And we heard in detail from the Honourable Member for Conlington the extent of the appalling damage to Emma and Janet's precious children, and all of it was preventable. Both Janet and Emma campaigned tirelessly for justice after being told, and in the case of Emma, time after time after time, that these drugs were safe to take in pregnancy. These women did ask the obvious questions when the truth was already well known, and they were still told that these drugs were safe to take while they were pregnant. Can you just imagine how that feels as a mum? I'd be absolutely furious. We all would. I'd want answers. I'd want justice, and so do they. Since 1973, it is approximated that 7,000 children have been harmed by exposure to valproate. No doubt there will be many other families who failed to conceive, had stillbirths or miscarriages, all because of this drug. This is why we must get answers, but it's also we must look at what compensation we can give to these families because of the failures of the NHS to protect and support them. The idea of compensation is one that has been established by our neighbours across the Channel, where the French Parliament has recognised the true scale of this injustice and established a fund worth €10 million to support the victims of valproate and their families. We on this side of the House believe that mistakes should be recognised, addressed and accordingly compensated for. We also believe that burying our heads in the sands and ignoring the demands of the victims goes against the nature of justice and righting the many wrongs of the past. These families must be supported and allowed to have a full investigation into the failures and damage they've had inflicted upon them. The Minister cannot ignore the scale of this tragedy and the numbers of lives that have been so adversely affected through no fault of their own, but through that of their medication prescribed by the NHS. We are here today to ensure the government wakes up to the enormity of this scandal and takes immediate action. More must be done to make women aware of the risks of taking valproate during pregnancy now, ensuring that the injustice which has gone on for far too long is righted and answers are found and support provided to these families who've seen their lives turned upside down because of what can only be described as a cover-up. The Minister should and must listen to what has been said today. I hope that he will assure the House that he has constructively listened and will go away and start the process of righting this pernicious wrong by holding a full public inquiry and properly supporting these families. They need, want and deserve justice, Mr Deputy Speaker. They should, at long last, receive nothing less.
Minister Philip. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I would like to start by congratulating the Right Honourable Member for North Norfolk on securing this debate through the good offices of the Backbench Business Committee. He has, as he's indicated today, taken a particular interest in this since his time. It was brought to attention during his time as a Minister in the Department of Health, and I think all tribute to him for being so persistent in that endeavour. This is a very important issue, and members across the House have come together once again, as has been pointed out by the member of Central Ayrshire, 2 weeks in a row, to demonstrate the concerns which are not partly political. This is affecting all of our constituents, irrespective of any party political alliance. And we've had some very constructive suggestions made across the House, and a number of personal incidents of cases which constituents have brought to the attention of members, which I think has been very moving. And rather than rehearse them, I would just point to my honourable friend, the member for Congleton, who went into some detail, as a member for Washington Sunderland West said, about the particular circumstances of the two outstanding campaigners who I'm pleased are here to witness this debate, who've spoken so powerfully about the effects that valproate has had on their lives and those of their children. Like them, I have very great sympathy for those families who've been affected by valproate use in pregnancy. The Association of British Neurologists advises that valproate remains the most effective treatment for generalised epilepsy, and this is reflected in NICE guidelines. For some women with epilepsy, it may be the only effective treatment, the only thing which prevents a potentially life-threatening seizure. But because of its risks, valproate should only be used to treat women of childbearing age if other drugs are ineffective or not tolerated. This is not a clear case of use or no use. This was clearly pointed out by the Honourable Member for Central Ayrshire, who speaks with authority on these matters. The key challenge for clinicians is to ensure that the drug is used only by those who really need it, and that they are fully informed about the risks and that their treatment is closely monitored. Very briefly.
Share my aspiration. Should be aiming to ensure that every woman, wherever they live, have access to a specialist unit.
I will come on to how I think access needs to be improved and monitoring as I wind up my remarks. As my honourable friend, the member for Eastleigh, acknowledged, it is vital that no woman stops taking valproate or any other anti-epileptic without first discussing it with their doctor and, if necessary, with the relevant specialist. The Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the MHRA, is currently working with European regulators and with experts and healthcare bodies to decide what further action should be taken. Like many anti-epileptics, valproate has always been known to carry a risk if taken during pregnancy, but as honourable members have pointed out today, important questions have been raised here in the Chamber and over the years about the extent to which women have been informed about the risks over the decades. At the time that valproate was first marketed in 1974 for the treatment of epilepsy, animal studies had shown that there might be a risk of birth defects. Health professionals were made aware of this and were expected to weigh the benefits against the risks. Difficult prescribing decisions had to be made. Campaigners and the Honourable Gentleman in his opening remarks have highlighted the minutes of a meeting of the Committee on Safety of Medicines in 1973, where the committee concluded that it would be best not to mention the risk of birth defects in package inserts. As has been referred to today, this paternalistic attitude has no place in the NHS of today. Now, patients and doctors are expected to make decisions based on open communication on the risks and benefits of a treatment which is underpinned by legislation. But that was not always the case, and the views expressed by the CSM in 1973 were not unusual at that time, particularly in relation to life-saving medicines such as anti-epileptics. I'm pleased to say that medical practice has changed considerably since then, and comprehensive patient information leaflets have been a legal requirement since 1999. Warnings have been issued when new evidence on risks has become available. The MHRA issued bulletins in 1983 and 1993 to update prescribers on the risk of birth defects, and in 2003 warned about a possible risk of developmental delay in children exposed to valproate during pregnancy. Warnings were extended to include a risk of autism in 2010, and a reminder bulletin was issued in 2013. But information on the full magnitude and nature of the risks with valproate first became available in 2013, following a long-term follow-up of children whose mothers had taken valproate and other anti-epileptics. And given these concerns, the MHRA initiated and led a Europe-wide review which completed in November 2014. The finding of this review was that there was still a clinical need for valproate, despite the significant risks to the child if taken in pregnancy. Valproate should remain an option for women of childbearing potential only where other treatments had failed or were not tolerated. To mitigate the risks, the recommendation was that women should use effective contraception and treatment should be supervised by a specialist. The MHRA sent a letter to doctors and pharmacists in January 2015 about the strengthened restrictions. But as well as updating statutory information, the MHRA has developed the valproate toolkit referred to by other honourable members. And although, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm not allowed quite properly to use props while I'm at the dispatch box, I cannot resist pointing out to honourable members that the packaging, the warnings now on valproate packaging include a very specific warning, which I will read, which says, "Warning for women and girls. This medicine can seriously harm an unborn baby. Always use effective contraception during treatment. If you're thinking about becoming pregnant or you become pregnant, talk to your doctor straight away." In addition to that warning on the packages, there are other elements of the toolkit which I won't trouble the House to read, but including patient cards, information for patients, information for prescribers and clinicians. The toolkit was distributed to doctors and pharmacists in February 2016. Messages sent through different channels then and subsequently have reinforced the recommendation of its use to support discussions with patients. Given the importance of the issue, the former Minister for Life Sciences in the autumn of 2015 brought together healthcare bodies to support the promotion of the toolkit and ensure coordinated messaging to health professionals and patients. The MHRA further developed this group into a 39-strong stakeholder network of health system organisations, health professional bodies, charities and campaign groups, which include, in fact, Facts Aware, OACs and Epilepsy Action, the Epilepsy Society and the Royal College of General Practitioners and the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. Our communication strategy has been informed at every step by the valproate stakeholder network, including NHS England. responding to concerns about gaps in awareness identified by several members in the debate today. In July of this year, the toolkit was redistributed to GPs and specialist prescribers, and additional materials were distributed to pharmacies. Over 100,000 healthcare professionals in total have received the toolkit this year. So what are we doing beyond that? We are tracking changes in prescribing. Data shows that between 2012 and 2017, there's been an approximately 26% decline in the number of women of childbearing age treated with valproate. The decline is sharper amongst 10 to 17-year-olds. And although usage is declining, there has not been the step change that we would want to see, and the results of surveys of patient awareness of the risk, again as referred to today, clearly indicates that more needs to be done. I'm aware that campaigners have called for the use of the toolkit to be made mandatory. The MHRA and NHS Improvement have sent a patient safety alert in April of this year, which directs organisations to identify systematically women and girls taking valproate and to support them to make informed choices. MHRA and NHS Improvement are monitoring implementation of this alert and are following up directly with relevant organisations. And this action has been taken consistently across the UK and through the devolved administrations. The MHRA is fully involved in the new Europe-wide review to look into whether further restrictions are needed, and an expert working group of the Commission on Human Medicines, a committee of MHRA, has been convened to inform the UK position during this EU review, which is expected to conclude early in the new year. The review is also looking carefully at whether there is any evidence of adverse effects in babies whose father took valproate. I'm sure the whole House would have been very moved by the personal testimony of the Honourable Member for Bury North of the consequences of childhood meningitis and his 6 years on valproate to control epilepsy. I hope I've made clear that we are taking this seriously. I have enormous sympathy for those families who've been affected by valproate use in pregnancy. And in the short time that I have available, I'd just like to touch on a couple of the issues specifically raised by the Honourable Member. He talked about support. We do have an established system reinforced by the Children and Families Act 2014 to establish a new framework for local authorities and CCGs to secure services for children and young people who have special educational needs or disability. I'm not going to get into here the question of compensation or inquiry. What I would say to the Honourable Gentleman is that there is a meeting arranged for the chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group to discuss with my colleague, the Parliamentary Secretary for Health, and the issues that he's raised, I think, should be brought forward to that meeting. I would encourage other members of the All-Party Group to join him in coming to that meeting at the Department. I will look at the feasibility of extending the yellow card system as described by honourable members. I do think it is right that we shine the spotlight of transparency to improve patient safety. No government has done more than we have in other areas to do this. I think the victims of valproate deserve nothing less.
Norman Lamb.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank sincerely all honourable and right honourable members for an incredibly well-informed, responsible, but also very powerful debate today. This is a fight for justice. The Minister is right that we have a meeting planned for the 7th of December with his colleague, the Noble Lord O'Shaughnessy. And I hope very much by then that the government will have reached a view on the case for compensation. It seems to me that the government has a choice here. It can either deny the unanswerable moral case for treating these people properly, or it can take a moral lead and accept that the state has a responsibility to these families. I hope very much that it's the latter, but I thank all honourable members for participating in this debate.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order.
I beg to move the House now adjourned.
The question is, this House do now and then. Dame Margaret Hodge.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Deputy Speaker, and I thank you for selecting this debate, and I thank the Minister for her attendance. And I'd also like to thank the people who helped me prepare for the debate this afternoon, in particular The Guardian, Bellingcat, Transparency International and Global Witness. We in Britain pride ourselves on our integrity, respectability and trustworthiness. We tell ourselves that this is a country that believes in high ethical standards of behaviour in the way we conduct ourselves as individuals, in the way we run our businesses and in the way we function as professionals. We preach to developing countries about how to stamp out corruption. We sell Britain to foreign investors by telling them that they can trust us, trust our laws, and trust our corporate rules and institutions. Yet last month, yet another bundle of leaked documents from yet another brave whistleblower, this time about Azerbaijan.